Josh worked in silence as the ship moved through deep space, lights blinking around him. Machines humming. The only sound in the control room was the steady breath of the alien. Beside him, her name was Zura. She was tall and calm with silver skin and glowing eyes. Her fingers moved across the panel fast and smooth, never shaking, never missing a step. They had worked together for weeks and never had a real talk. She said little, only nods and soft yes or no answers. The others on the crew said she was a warrior trained for battle, not for words, but Josh had seen something more in her eyes. Maybe pain, maybe memories, maybe something locked away. Josh missed Earth. He missed air that smelled like rain. He missed laughter and music, and most of all he missed Mira. She had been his heart before she joined a mission and vanished before anyone knew what happened. She was listed as lost in space, but Josh still dreamed of her voice, still heard her laugh when he slept that day. As Zura adjusted the navigation field, Josh looked at her and said the name just once, soft and almost like a whisper. Myra. Zura froze. Her hands stopped moving. Her whole body went still like a statue. Her glowing eyes turned to Josh, slowly, and for the first time, he saw something wild in them. He smiled, trying to fill the silence. I used to know someone with that name. She loved stars too, always wanted to fly. He said it with a sad laugh. Zura's jaw clenched. Her breath grew sharp and loud. Then without a sound she raised her arm and slammed her hand down on the console. The metal cracked like dry bone. Sparks flew. The lights went red. Alarms screamed across the ship, and Josh jumped back, falling from his chair as smoke filled the room. Zura stood over the broken console, her hands still pressed deep into the shattered frame. Her face had no tears, but her eyes shook with something deep. Josh stared at her. Zura, what did you do? He said, his voice shaking. She turned to him slow and cold and said, never say her name again. Before Josh could speak, the door slammed open, and 2 security units rushed in, their weapons ready, their voices sharp. Stand down, step away. Zura did not move. Her hand pulled free from the console, leaving wires and sparks behind. Then she walked past the guards like they were not there. Josh tried to follow, but one of the guards held him back. Wait, where are you taking her? What happened? Why did she do that? The guard said nothing, just dragged Josh to the hall. While smoke curled from the broken console behind them, they placed Josh in a holding room. Gray walls, and one light above his head. He sat there for hours, replaying it over and over. The name, the look in her eyes, the way her hand crushed steel like it was paper. He kept asking himself why. What did that name mean to her? Why did it shake her so hard? He did not know, but he felt it in his chest. Zura was hiding something deep, something old, something that had just cracked open like the console she left in pieces. As the door opened and footsteps came near, Josh looked up, hoping for answers. Instead, he saw Captain Orell's face, hard eyes, sharper than ice. You are going to tell me everything about what happened on that bridge? Josh opened his mouth, but stopped, his mind spinning. All he had done was say a name, and the whole ship had nearly broken apart. In the quiet that followed, he heard something soft behind him, like a whisper, but in a voice he did not know. A strange glow lit the wall behind the bench, words written in alien script, glowing bright and fading fast. You made her remember. Josh stared at the fading light, his breath caught in his chest. This was not just about him, not just about Mira, it was about Zura, and whatever lived in her past, whatever she tried to forget, and now it was awake again. The light in the holding room flickered as Josh sat alone, his mind running in circles, trying to piece together what had just happened. His thoughts kept returning to the moment Zura crushed the console, the cold stillness in her face, the heat in her eyes, the strange way she spoke those 5 words, never say her name again. He had said the name Mira, a name from Earth, a name that once made him smile, but now it felt like a key that had opened a locked chamber in someone else's mind. The door hissed open again, and this time it was not the captain who entered. It was a crew medic named Lyra. She was human, but had worked with aliens for years, and had seen things that Josh could not even imagine. She placed a scanner on the table and spoke softly. You are lucky you are not burned. That console almost exploded. Josh nodded slowly. I said a name and she lost it, just lost it. Lyra looked at him carefully, then leaned in closer. Did the name mean something to you? She was someone I loved, he said, voice low. Someone who never came back from a mission. I thought she was gone, but when I said her name, Zura reacted like she knew her. Lyra frowned. Zura is not like the others. She is a warrior, yes, but she carries silence like armor. There are things she will never say, things she cannot say. Josh stared at the wall, thinking, then turned back. How can a name shake her that hard? Lyra sighed. You do not know her kind, not really. Her people do not show emotions the way we do. They hold them in like fire trapped in stone. But when the stone cracks... Josh felt a chill in the air. So you are saying, I broke something in her. You unlocked something, maybe something buried along time. Lyra stood and walked out, leaving Josh with 100 more questions and no answers. Later, he was released from the holding room, but not without warning. The captain made it clear. He was on watch. One more mistake, and he would be off the ship. For good, Josh returned to his bunk, trying to rest. But sleep would not come. Images kept flashing in his mind. Zura's glowing eyes, the broken console, the whisper on the wall. You made her remember. The next morning, he found a message in his comms. Not from the captain, not from the crew, but from the ship. AI, it said. Report to Dock Bay. For special maintenance duty. No other names, no reason given. Josh followed the order, curious and wary. The bay was empty, except for one other person standing. In the shadows, it was Zura. She did not speak as he entered. She only turned and began walking toward a small maintenance shuttle, her steps slow and heavy. Josh followed, unsure what to say, unsure if she would break another panel if he spoke again. They entered the shuttle and sealed the hatch. The ship I activated autopilot, and the small craft drifted away from the main vessel toward a nearby satellite that had gone dark last week. Silence filled the shuttle until Zura finally spoke. Her voice quiet. The name you said, it was not random. No, Josh replied. She was real. Mira, she was a human from Earth. She was my everything. She vanished during a deep space mission years ago. Zura looked at him, her eyes softer now, still glowing, but with something else in them, pain maybe, or fear. There was someone with that name on my world, when she said, barely above a whisper. Josh froze. What do you mean, on your world? She nodded. A long time ago, a human woman came through a rift near our border. Space. She was taken in, questioned, tested, but she escaped. No one knew how she vanished like a ghost, but some believed she left something behind. Josh leaned forward, his heart pounding. What did she leave behind? Zura looked away and said nothing. The shuttle docked at the satellite, and they stepped into the quiet dark space. As they walked down the cold corridor, Josh noticed Zura step slow, then stop. She pointed to a sealed door covered in dust and marks. She placed her hand on it, and it opened without a sound. Inside was a room filled with old parts, broken wires, and something strange in the corner. A small panel with human letters scratched into the surface. Josh walked closer and read the name carved in rust. Mira. His breath caught. Zura stepped beside him and said one word, Mother. The silence between them grew heavy and full of meaning. Josh turned to her, eyes wide. You think Mira was your mother? Zura looked at him and nodded just once. Everything began to spin in Josh's head. The name, the pain, the rage, it all made sense. Now this was no longer just about a memory or a mistake. It was about blood. It was about loss. It was about truth, buried in the stars, waiting to be found again. The air inside the satellite felt thin and cold as Josh stood near the carved name. His fingers brushed the letters. Mira, and a wave of emotion hit him like a storm. It was her name, her real name, etched into metal light years from Earth. Zura stood still, eyes locked on the panel like she had seen a ghost. Her voice came slow and quiet, as if afraid to break something fragile inside herself. I was just a child when she came. She was not like anyone I had seen before. Her skin, her voice, the way she smiled. Josh felt his heart race, his hands shaking. He turned to her. You remember her? Zura nodded. She was kind. She held my hand and told me stories about colors and places I had never imagined, but one day she was gone, taken by guards, taken by silence and fire. Josh listened, his mind struggling to believe Mira, the woman he loved, had somehow reached a distant alien world and touched a life he had never known. Zura walked deeper into the room, her fingers sliding across old tools and broken devices. I was told never to speak of her, never to say her name. They called her Danger. They said she brought chaos with her presence. Josh asked, how did she get here? Zura stopped and pointed to a round device half buried under dust. It was cracked but still hummed faintly. Josh stepped closer and saw strange earth markings. It looked like a jump beacon, a tech prototype Mira had once studied. She tried to build one. Josh whispered to himself. She said it could open space like folding paper. Maybe it worked. Maybe it sent her here. Zura nodded, and her voice dropped low and full of ache. She gave me a necklace with a name I could not read, she said. I must hide it. She said one day someone would come who knew that name. Josh reached into his pocket and pulled out a pendant, worn and old, the same one Myra gave him. The day she left it had the same letters. Zura gasped as he placed it in her palm. It lit up, faint blue light glowing between her fingers. Josh stared at her, shocked. It never glowed before. Zura looked at him, her eyes full of something deep, something almost too much to hold. Maybe it waited for me, she said. Maybe it needed her child to wake it. The lights around them flickered, then a soft hum filled the room as an old console in the corner blinked to life. Josh rushed over. The screen displayed a message in Old Earth script. Voice log access, Myra unit recording 1. Zura stepped forward and pressed her hand against the panel. The recording began. A soft voice filled the room. It was Mira, calm, strong, and full of love. If you are hearing this, then I did not make it back. I am sorry. I came through the rift by accident, the beacon failed, and I landed in a place full of fear, but I met a child with silver eyes and a gentle heart. She reminded me of home of hope. Zura closed her eyes, listening, her breath shaking. Myra's voice continued. They told me I was a threat, they took me, but I escaped. I left behind this message for the one who carries my light. I hope you find it. I hope you know you are not alone. Josh felt a tear slip down his face. The message ended and silence returned, but it was not empty anymore. Zura looked at him and said, I remember her touch now. I remember how she cried when they took her. She called my name, and then they burned everything. Josh reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder, not as a friend, not as a teammate, but as someone who now shared the same pain. They were no longer just two beings from different stars, they were pieces of the same broken story, and now that story had found its voice again. Zura turned and opened a hidden drawer. In the wall inside was a small drive glowing with faint power. This was hers, she said. I never knew what it was. I was too afraid to look. Josh took the drive and placed it into his wrist. Reader files, opened maps, notes, and a warning. If you are reading this, they know. Josh froze. Zura looked at him with fear in her voice. Who knows? Before Josh could answer, the lights shut down, alarms screamed, and the satellite shook. Something had found them, something not friendly. Zura pulled him close, her voice firm and sharp. We are not safe here. Josh nodded and followed her into the shuttle, as metal groaned and fire flickered behind them. As they launched away from the satellite, Josh looked back at the broken place that had held so many secrets, and now had awakened something old and dangerous. He held the drive close, and made a silent promise he would not let his story vanish again. The shuttle flew through the darkness, with only the stars to guide them. No signal, no escort, no sound except the steady hum of the engine, and the soft breath of two beings caught in something much bigger than they ever imagined. Josh sat near the small window watching space drift past. His hand gripped the drive. Myra's drive, the one that held messages, warnings, and memories from years ago. Zura sat across from him, her eyes closed, her breathing slow but not calm. Her fists were tight, her body tense like a storm held just beneath the skin. He wanted to speak, but did not know how every word felt, too small, too fragile. Then Zura opened her eyes and spoke without looking at him. I remember her now. Josh turned to her gently. When she came to our world, she smiled at me like the sun. I had never seen the sun before, only cold lights and orders, and steel walls. She called me little flame, said I was born to burn bright. Josh felt a lump rise in his throat. She told me stories about blue skies and soft grass, and rivers that sang at night. She would hum songs that made my skin warm, but the elders saw her as danger. They said she brought weakness. They said love was poison to warriors, like us. Zura's voice shook now. They came one night with weapons and chains. They dragged her from the small room she had hidden in. She fought. She screamed my name, but they hit her again and again, until the light in her voice broke. Josh closed his eyes. I tried to follow, but they held me back. They locked me away, said I was tainted, said I had to forget her or be cast out. I tried to forget. I tried to bury her name deep inside my mind, but I could not. Zura stood now, her hand on the wall, her back to Josh. Then you said her name, and it all came back like fire through my bones. Josh stood and walked to her. Slowly Zura turned to him, and for the first time her eyes were not sharp, not cold, but wet with tears she did not let fall. She was more than your love. She was my mother, and I hated myself for forgetting her. Josh reached out and touched her shoulder. You did not forget, he said softly. You survived. That is not forgetting. She looked at him and nodded. Just once, then turned back to the console. We are close to the coordinates, the last ones your Myra left in the logs. Josh watched the screen. A small moon drifted into view, old, damaged, and covered in shadows. As they landed, the shuttle shook and metal groaned under pressure. They stepped out into thick mist and soft blue light. The ground cracked under each step like glass. In the distance, a strange shape rose from the fog, an old escape pod half buried in the soil vines. Crawling over it, like fingers trying to hide something, Zura rushed ahead and knelt beside it, her hands brushing away the dirt. Josh joined her, his breath caught as he saw what was written across the pod. Myra Talon, her full name. This is where she fell. Zura whispered, this is where she escaped to after they hurt her. Josh opened the pod with care, and found inside a box, a thin journal, and a sealed message unit. Zura picked up the journal, and flipped through it, each page full of Mira's voice, each line a piece of her soul. She wrote about hope and fear and love, about Zura's eyes, and laugh, about a man she left behind on Earth, a man named Josh. He felt his knees weaken as he read his own name. In her final thoughts, I wanted to return to him. I wanted to raise Zura with him, but I was broken and hunted. So I stayed to keep her safe. Zura's hand shook as she opened the message unit. Mira's voice filled the air again, softer, now weaker. My daughter, if you see this, I am gone. I loved you with everything. I had never forget that you are not what they say you are light and you are choice. Zura closed the unit and held it to her chest. Josh placed his hand over hers. They sat there beside the pod in silence, not empty silence, but silence full of truth, full of pain, full of a bond that now could never be broken. Then the ground trembled. Josh looked up. Alarms flashed on his wrist. Something was coming. Zura stood, her eyes hard again. They followed us. Josh nodded and pulled her close. We are not done yet, he said. Not even close. They turned back to the shuttle, as shadows moved in the mist, ready to face whatever was coming next, with her name burning bright inside them both. The shadows in the mist moved fast like snakes in the dark. The ground shook harder as the wind began to howl. Josh and Zura reached the shuttle just as a blast hit the ground behind them, throwing dust and fire into the air. Zura pulled the hatch open and shoved Josh inside, then followed as a second blast rocked the trees nearby. Inside the shuttle, alarms screamed, but the engine still held strong. Josh jumped into the pilot seat, hands flying across controls, while Zura powered up shields and weapons. Through the screen they saw it, a black ship, sleek and sharp, floating above the trees, its lights red and cruel. Zura's voice was cold now. That is a hunter. Josh looked at her confused. They are sent to clean what must not be seen, she said. They come when silence is broken. Josh felt his gut twist. That means they know we found the pod. Zura nodded and raised the shields again. The enemy ship fired again, the blast hitting their shield and shaking the shuttle like a can. Josh turned the ship and flew low through the canyons, hoping the rocks would buy them time. Zura stared at the console as the readings blinked and flashed, then her eyes locked on the drive. Mira's drive, the one that carried her last messages. She took it and plugged it into the shuttle core. Data spilled out, maps, codes, recordings, and one strange file. Josh glanced over. What is that? Zura opened the file, and a new voice filled the shuttle. Not Mira, but someone else, calm and cold. This is Unit 0. Her voice said, if you are hearing this, then her blood is active and her code is awake. Josh blinked. Blood and code. Zura leaned forward, her fingers trembling open. Full file. The screen changed and showed Mira in a lab surrounded by alien tech. Her voice in the recording, soft and clear. I used human tech mixed with their code. I made a key, something only my child could unlock. Josh felt his chest tighten. You made her a weapon. No, Myra said in the file. I made her free. Zura watched without blinking, her hand over her chest. The screen showed Myra again, this time whispering to the camera. If she finds this, she will know who she is. She will know what they did and what they feared. Then the screen went black. Josh looked at Zura and saw the fire in her eyes again, but this time it was not pain, it was purpose. Zura turned and walked to the back of the shuttle. She opened a case hidden under the floor. Inside was a suit, a strange mix of armor and cloth, glowing with soft blue light. Josh stepped closer. What is that? Zura touched it, and the light grew brighter. My mother left it for me. She knew I would need it. Josh helped her strap it on. As the ship shook again from another blast, Zura stood taller, stronger, her skin glowing faintly, the suit pulsing with each beat of her heart. They want to erase her again, she said, but I will not let them. Josh nodded and fired up the shuttle thrusters. We need to get to the outer ring, signal a friendly post, and send the truth. Zura looked at the drive one last time, then placed it into the ship core. Let the whole galaxy hear her story. As the black ship followed behind, their small shuttle dove into the stars fast and low. Zura sat in silence, eyes forward, heart burning. Josh glanced at her and saw not just a warrior, but something more. Not a weapon, not a machine, a daughter. A voice that had been silenced for too long, and now it was ready to be heard. Behind them, the black ship roared and charged its weapons, but ahead of them, hope still burned like a path through the void. They would not stop, they would not forget. They would carry her name to the end of the stars if they had to, together, always forward. The stars streaked past as the shuttle tore through the void, fast and low. Sat in the co-pilot's seat, eyes fixed ahead, hands steady as stone, her breathing calm but her mind on fire. Josh kept glancing at her, feeling the weight of what they carried. Not just data, not just memories, but truth. The Black Hunter ship chased close, its red lights blinking like warning fangs. Each blast from its cannons rocked the shuttle, but Josh kept the craft weaving through asteroid fields and gas trails, hoping to outrun what felt like fate. Zura tapped the console, pulling up the drive. Again, her mother's final codes flickered across the screen, revealing hidden messages, old reports, and one final location, a place marked by Mira herself, a world not found on any modern map, hidden behind a field of static and war debris. This is where she wanted me to go. Zura said, her voice calm, but full of steel. Josh nodded and adjusted course, punching through the cloud of burning space. Junked toward the lost coordinates. The hunter ship still chased, but now it kept distance, like it knew where they were heading and did not want to follow too far. The planet appeared slowly from behind a shattered moon, dark and cracked and glowing faintly with green light. Zura stared, as if her soul remembered something. This is where they took her. After the capture, she said, this is where they broke her, this is where they buried everything. Josh landed the shuttle on the edge of a black valley, wind howling around them, ash falling from the sky. Like snow, they stepped out onto dead soil, and silence. Zura led him toward a giant structure, part temple, part machine, buried under rock and vines. Symbols lined the walls, written in both alien and Earth languages. Josh ran his fingers over the carvings, the mix of code and memory forming a story of two worlds colliding, of love forbidden, and of a child born of both. Inside the structure, lights flickered as they entered. Mira had left traces here to old recordings, voices trapped in crystal. One voice spoke loud and clear. The council declares, this union void, the human shall be silenced, the child shall be observed and corrected. Zura flinched at the words corrected. Josh clenched his fists, rage rising. They tried to erase her future, to mold it into what they could control. They walked deeper into the hall, until they found a central chamber, with a tall crystal in the middle, glowing with a heartbeat. Zura placed a hand on it, and it pulsed bright blue. A figure appeared, made of light. Mira's face. She smiled, calm and full of strength. Zura, if you were here, then you found what they tried to hide. I made you from love, not from fear. I left behind my mind in this place, so you could awaken not as their tool, but as yourself. The light faded, and the crystal cracked, releasing waves of data across the hall. Lights burst around them, showing memories, showing battles, showing hidden plans. Josh stepped back as a new voice cut through the noise, cold and sharp. Unauthorized access detected. Defense units engaged. Walls opened, and machines stepped out. Their eyes read, their limbs built for war. Zura turned, her body glowing again, her armor reacting to the threat. She stood firm. You locked her in a cage. You tried to lock me in one to the machines charged, but Zura moved faster, a blur of light and fire. Josh backed toward the control panel, trying to open an exit, while Zura fought. She moved like flame, sharp and fluid, striking with power that came not from rage, but from purpose. Each machine that fell sparked with blue light, as if the system inside them still carried parts of Myra's code. Josh found the exit trigger and shouted for Zura. She spun and sprinted through the door, just as it sealed behind her, locking the rest of the machines inside. They fell to the ground outside, breathing hard, the valley behind them silent once more. Zura looked at her hands, her skin still glowing, the pulse in her armor slow and steady. They feared this, she said softly. Not the power, but the truth, the connection between heart and code, between mother and child, between human and alien. Josh helped her to her feet. We send this out now, the whole story. Zura nodded. Let them all hear it. Let them all see what was hidden. They returned to the shuttle, the drive now full with everything they had found. Josh sent the signal across the system, the data moving like wildfire, and far across the stars, answers began to stir. Because truth once freed cannot be buried again. The signal flew through space faster than any ship, bouncing across satellites, hidden arrays, and ancient networks that had slept for years. Zura and Josh sat in the cockpit of the shuttle, watching the transmission light blink green, one after another. Held the data drive in her lap, eyes fixed on the screen. Her hands still glowed faintly, the armor pulsing with a soft light that matched her heartbeat. She had said nothing since they left the ruined temple, but her silence was no longer cold. Was calm. Josh leaned back in his seat, staring at the stars, thinking about all they had seen, all they had learned, and all they had lost. He thought of Myra, and her smile, the sound of her voice, and the way she spoke of hope. He looked at Zura, and spoke gently. The galaxy knows the truth. Now they cannot bury it. Again Zura nodded slowly, then turned to him, her voice steady. They will deny it, they will twist it, but someone will listen. Someone will remember. They flew in silence for a long time, letting the stars pass by, letting the message move on its own. Then the ship received a reply, not one, but hundreds signals from ships, outposts, old Earth colonies, and even alien stations. People had heard the message, and they were speaking back, voices filled the calm, some crying, some whispering, some simply saying thank you. Zura closed her eyes and let them wash over her. The messages was one from a forgotten Earth archive. It held Myra's full file, all missions, all logs, everything hidden behind locked doors, now opened by her daughters. Josh read the last line in her journal aloud. If love survives, then I have not failed. Zura stood and walked to the back of the shuttle, where the old pendant still hung near the power core. She touched it with her fingers and whispered her mother's name. The light grew brighter, and a small hidden drawer opened, revealing One last message, a projection of Myra, looking tired, but smiling. If you made it this far, then I am proud of you, my flame. You were always more than what they told you, more than what they feared. Zura watched the message until it faded, then took the pendant and placed it around her neck. She returned to the front of the shuttle and looked at Josh. We are not done. Josh smiled. We are just getting started. They changed course and headed for a new system, one that needed the truth, one that had silenced people like Mira before. As they flew, Josh noticed something strange on the radar, a group of ships forming near the edge of known space. Zura tapped the screen. They carry no flags, no names, no war colors. Josh checked the signals. They're old models from both Earth and alien fleets. Working together, the ship sent one clear message across the comms: we heard her story, and we choose to follow the truth. Zura looked at Josh with a quiet fire in her eyes. Not warriors, not rebels, but witnesses. They docked at a small station orbiting a quiet moon. People gathered around the shuttle, waiting not with weapons but with open hands. Zura stepped out first, and for the first time, she was not seen as a soldier or a threat, but as a daughter of two worlds. Josh followed her as cheers and tears filled the air. Someone handed Zura a flower, one that only grew on Mira's homeworld. She took it and placed it by her heart. The station lights dimmed, and a large screen lit up, showing Mira's message, the one Zura had sent into the stars. People stood in silence as the story played. They watched her fight, they watched her fall, they watched her daughter rise. When it ended, no one spoke for a long time. Then one child asked her name. Zura looked at the child and smiled. Mira. The child repeated it softly, and it echoed across the room, across the station, across space. Later, as they sat near a window watching stars dance around them, Josh turned to Zura. Do you think she would be Zura nodded yes, because I carry her voice, and it is no longer silent. Josh placed a hand on her shoulder. Her name lives on. Zura closed her eyes and felt the warmth of the stars, the weight of the past, and the promise of what was coming. They had not saved the galaxy, but they had sparked something, and in that spark, Mira lived in her daughter, in the truth, in every voice that dared to speak again. The stars moved slowly, but they were listening now, and the silence that once ruled the galaxy was finally broken forever.